morning, ladies and gentlemen. A few months after I initially hung a shingle and started my practice here in Gwinnett, I had a conversation with a receptionist at the Gwinnett DA's office. I don't know how his name came up, but she brought up the name of Muhammad Ali. And when she brought up his name, I got excited. He was one of my heroes. But before I got a chance to wax poetically about Muhammad Ali, she sort of dashed on my hopes when she said, "Oh yes, he was a draft dodger." Draft dodger. You mean when he refused to go to fight in Vietnam because of what he saw as racial inequality here in the United States? Draft dodger. I got it. So in that conversation, what she told me is the person that I considered to be a good person, the person who had sacrificed a great deal to help others at his own personal comfort and expense. The person that I considered to be a good person, she considered that person to be a bad person. I suspect not many of you have heard of or remember Nirja Banat. In 1986, she was a 22-year-old chief flight attendant. She had been an Indian model. She had become a chief flight attendant for Pan Am. And she was present when 4 Palestinian terrorists boarded the plane. She Pan Am plane. She contacted the cockpit, pilot, co-pilot, flight attendant. They ran off, leaving her and the rest of the staff there for about 17 hours. During the 17 hours, the terrorists shot an Indian American, dumped him off the plane, and demanded that she and the other folks there on the plane gather all the American passports so they could shoot all of the remaining Americans on the plane. Probably haven't really heard her name before. So she and the other folks gathered up the passports, and then she dumps them down the trash so that the terrorists aren't able to determine who is American, therefore saving a number of lives. At the end of the 17 hours, terrorists set off some explosives and start shooting, and of course she opens up the door, and rather than doing what the co-pilot and the pilot and the flight attendant did, she's actually helping other folks off, and she ends up losing her life while she is protecting 3 children who are exiting the plane. About 3 years prior to that, 1983, person I'm sure you've heard of, Diana Ross, she's given a free concert in New York City. I'm in the city at the time. I'm in the West Village at a place called Vinyl Mania, picking up my fix of vinyl for the week. When I see the clouds roll in, dark clouds roll in, and then there are these torrential rains. It's crazy. She's on stage at the time when it gets real dark in Central Park, and she can see that there are a number of people that are panicking in the park. So she stays on stage in the pouring rain amongst all the electrical equipment, even though her handlers are saying, "Come off the stage, come off the stage." She's like, "No, I can't do it, because as long as I'm here, I can calm the crowd." And that's what she did. She switched out the connected mic for a wireless mic. And I love the iconic thing that she says to the crowd to calm them down. She said, "It took me a lifetime to get here. I'm not going anywhere." And ultimately, no one lost their life in 1983 because, by my definition, Diana Ross ultimately was a good person. I bring you those 3 examples because when I came to you in the opening, I told you David Booker's not a good person. Not by my definition of a good person. A good person, by my definition, is ultimately a person that goodness starts with generosity. It starts with generosity. Generosity not towards your family, but the people that you don't know, with the expectation of not actually receiving anything. By that definition, David Booker's not a good person. Watch this, but neither am I. I don't even consider myself a good person. The prosecutor comes up here and he gives you this dichotomy, this false dichotomy. You can either be good or you can be bad. Like they're right next to each other. That's the beauty of jury trials. You sit, you talk to people, you pick intelligent people, people that understand it's not a question of good and bad. We have good people and bad people, and most of the people are somewhere in between. David Booker is somewhere in between. He's not a good person. He's not a good person, but I'm not a good person. The beauty of the whole thing is criminal trials are not about discerning who's good and who's bad. It's just not. Criminal trial is about you looking at the state's evidence and then determining, based on the evidence that was presented to you and the law that the judge gives you, has the state proven what they say has occurred? They've accused David Booker and others. Has the state proven beyond a reasonable doubt that he's guilty of what they say he is? Good and bad really never really ultimately comes into it. And then I got up. And before I asked the first question, did everybody think David Booker was the driver? Did anybody think David Booker was the driver? What's the first question I asked? Was David Booker the driver? And then, of course, we learned David Booker was not the driver of the vehicle. So David Booker is taken on a high-speed chase, 2022. If he's a bad person, then he's presumed guilty. But the judge is going to tell you he's presumed innocent. His being a good person or a bad person has absolutely nothing to do with anything. But on top of the bad acts evidence, you got what? You got all this gang evidence. Gang. Understand how you received that gang evidence. That's important. Most of the gang evidence that you received came off of some form of social media. Ladies and gentlemen, I could play you a minute to a minute and a half of rap, give you a different artist for the next 7 hours, all of them nationally recognized folks. There's no scalpel sharp enough to separate David's rap from the depravity of the cultural rap that he was raised on. So when you sit here and the prosecutor plays this, oh my God, this is so shocking. It can't be shocking. His tattoo, as the prosecutor's already indicated to you, mimics 21 Savage. People want to be more than they can be. And while we can name in the black community 500 rap artists, we can't name 5 surgeons. I'll give you Ben Carson. We can't name 5 surgeons, 5 architects, but we know 500 rappers. And it gives the instructions in regards to my client that he never needs to get on the stand and testify. You can't ultimately hold that against him. The state called 21 witnesses. How many witnesses put my client into QT? 0. How many witnesses testified about David's fingerprints or his DNA being at the scene? 0. My client never made any admission to the police ultimately when they spoke to him, and he spoke to the police about being into QT, and you've seen absolutely 0 text messages to or from David regarding any participation in any type of slight or crime. Crimes. That's actually putting someone at the scene. So the judge is going to tell you the opportunity of the witness to view the alleged perpetrator at the time of the incident. Well, you already know that's not David. The judge is going to tell you the witness's degree of attention towards the alleged perpetrator at the time of the incident. Nobody showed any witness any photo spread where they picked out David and said, yes, I think that he was there. The judge is going to talk about the possibility of mistaken identity as an assessment of reliability of identification, but nobody ever identified David. What the judge is not going to tell you is digital DNA is a factor. Purchases insurance for a vehicle some 36 or more hours prior to the homicide, that doesn't put David Booker in the homicide. It is. Maybe you already know, well, it's the music, but we can't say that. It's the music. If they listen to more than 7 hours of it a day, from the time they come out the womb till about the age of 20, they're going to end up heading that way. That's where it starts to get a little shaky. You're a gang member, so if you commit a shoplifting, is that to promote the gang, or did you just want to get mascara for your girlfriend? That's where you, the jury, have to determine whether to find David guilty. He was present. Let's assume that you think, well, he's not present, but wait a minute. The state's already told you they think he's present. So you can't come to a determination where you say, I don't think he was present, but I somehow think that he's guilty despite the fact that he wasn't present. The only way you're going to get to that is you're going to have to admit, I'm susceptible to the gang evidence. It's going to be your duty to find David Booker not guilty of all charges. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Jurors during a fairly lengthy trial, which this one has been, do not get an opportunity to speak themselves. They do not get an opportunity to ask questions of their own. They're simply required to listen and to absorb and to understand. I can't tell you where Mr. Collins might fall into a particular gang. I can't tell you what role he might have assumed in a gang. There has been no testimony whatsoever about when he became a member of a gang. Literally nothing was produced linking Mr. Collins at all to gang testimony. And look at the indictment when you are deliberating. Implicit in the way this case has been indicted is the idea of a contemplation by the individuals involved that the underlying offenses were contemplated to be committed during the commission of this offense. Okay? Those offenses are felony murder, ag assault, hijacking a motor vehicle, possession of a firearm during the commission of a crime. All 5 of those crimes require the use of a firearm. All 5 of those crimes allege the use of a firearm. For a second. If the offenses were not contemplated, no one expected that the gun would be pulled, no one expected that the gun would be used, then how on earth could they have been contemplated in advance? But that's what we've got here. He produces that handgun sometime during the course of the brief incident which transpires. If he had not produced a handgun, his handgun could not have been taken from him. That handgun ultimately winds up on the ground where he is having a dispute or a scuffle with the individual who had been in his car, pulling out the individual who is much stronger, and well, he's stronger or not, I don't know, but much taller, certainly, much bigger than he is. Again, is that plausible? Now, at that point, had Mr. Coleman produced the gun? First off, you can see it's a Mercedes that drove away from the scene. You can see the point. I mean, there was a photograph taken by Mr. Waits, the gentleman from across the street. Mr. Waits got a good view of the car. There's no question that it's a Mercedes. We will concede that point. Okay? Is it the Mercedes that the police believe was used in the commission of a crime? They found that phone that was used in ultimately creating that exhibit. What does that tell you? There are times when Mr. Collins does not have his phone. We know how sophisticated and adept DNA evidence has become. We know because certain DNA samples were taken off of a COVID mask. Okay? That DNA was subsequently connected to Josiah Hewlett. Okay? It was not connected to either Mr. Booker or to Mr. Collins. But they were both able to get 8 to 10 feet away from the car, and it was when Mr. Coleman was presenting his weapon that Mr. Hewley fired the shot. You have heard his statement. That is a guy who basically says, I didn't intend to do it. Doesn't even say he's the person who interjected the gun initially into the circumstance, but it was him or me. He made the decision. He will have to bear the consequences. But again, was that something that was contemplated by everybody in the car? Of a hijacking of a motor vehicle in this case, based on the facts we have. And secondly, because the offense has been abandoned at the conclusion of the offense when Mr. Coleman intervenes. Okay? But the bottom line is, do you know, or can you conclude based on that that homicide had any connection to the hijacking of a motor vehicle? And the answer is no. This should never have happened, but for fortuitous circumstances, it never would have. But to take from that tragedy and decide that my client, Miles Collins, seated here before you here today, is guilty of the crimes that he is charged with, would be pure and simple a travesty. Consider what I have said. Listen to Ms. Drake, listen to Mr. Melvin, listen to the entirety, and listen to one another. I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that when you ultimately deliberate as to the fate of Miles Collins, my client, you will have no option other than to return a verdict which reflects the truth, a verdict of not guilty as to each and every charge of the indictment. I thank you for your attention.
First off is the presumption of innocence. Now, we've talked about that. What is the presumption of innocence? As this trial started, and even as they sit here today, these young men are presumed to be innocent until they're proven guilty. What's very important is that no person shall be convicted of any crime unless and until each element of that offense has been proved beyond a reasonable doubt. There is no burden whatsoever upon the defendant. We're going to talk about that a little bit more going down. The burden never shifts to the defense to prove innocence. Most importantly, especially in this particular set of facts, is that when a defense is raised by the evidence, the state also has the burden of proof to disprove that or negate it beyond a reasonable doubt. There's got to be a little something there to make you think, oh, well, something happened. But a grave suspicion that mainly places upon the defendant a speculation or a suspicion of the crimes charged is not sufficient to authorize a conviction. The state is going to argue mistake of fact is not a defense in this case because of Josiah. It's Josiah's fault. He made all of this happen. However, first off, there is no mistake of fact. The best the state can argue is that, oh, there's no way Mr. Coleman would have shot him. He wasn't going to shoot him. We really don't know. We do know that he had a gun. We do know that he was physically fighting with Josiah, not letting him leave the car. That was not brought on by Josiah in this case. He was trying to remove himself from the situation. On July the 10th, did attempt to obtain a Dodge Charger from the immediate presence of Bradley Coleman by force and violence while in the possession of a gun. And the attempt is enough, and the attempt was pulled up beside Bradley Coleman. There was actually a car in between them, and entered the vehicle. I fully expect the state to get up and say, all we have to do is prove attempt. That's all we have to prove. That is not exactly true. They do have to prove an attempt of hijacking. At best, the evidence in this case is an attempt for theft by taking motor vehicle or entering an auto with intent to commit a theft. But they didn't charge either of these defendants with that. Why? They overcharged. They wanted to go to hijacking, force or violence, which there's not. But obtaining is concluded when possession of the motor vehicle is attained. So in this particular case, Josiah gets into the car. Presumably his hands are on the steering wheel. We don't know if the car was running or if Josiah had to hit the button to cut it on because Mr. Coleman was outside. He was in possession of that car. The car moved. Whose control was the car under? At that point, it was under the control of Josiah. So that was already over. That event had concluded. The crime is not hijacking because of no gun, no presentation of gun, no force, no threats of force. I'm going to kill you, I'm going to shoot you, nothing like that. So, they really didn't introduce evidence if you think about it. Many of the fleeing, because the only people they put up were the officers who said, was in the area or was suspected in some car thefts. Okay, we have count 7, felony murder. There is going to be a different charge that you can consider, but I'm not going to address that right now because we never had a hijacking to start with. And count 7 in the indictment is specific to the hijacking. Count 7 is that Josiah committed the offense of murder when he caused the death of Bradley Coleman, irrespective of malice, while in the commission of the felony of hijacking a motor vehicle by attempting to take a vehicle belonging to Bradley Coleman by force while in the possession of a firearm. That is the language in the indictment. We already know that there wasn't any force, and we already know that possession of a firearm means that the firearm is used, it's branded, it's somehow integral to the force component of hijacking a motor vehicle. So on this particular felony murder count, the evidence suggests that it should be a straight not guilty because the hijacking itself never took place. Again, just because there was a death, just because there was a felony, there may be additional factors that you have to consider. That is the connection part. Defendant was sufficiently provoked and acted out of passion. If you find that to be the case, you cannot return a verdict of guilty on the felony murder, but you would be authorized to return a guilty verdict on voluntary manslaughter. This is very important. The state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the offense should not be reduced. This is a terrible, terrible situation. There's parents on this jury. I'm a parent. I cannot imagine what Mr. Coleman's parents are going through. I understand that. But, as I stated earlier, every homicide is not necessarily murder. You have to keep in mind, and no offense to my client, but at this time, back in 2022, he had just turned 20. Basically still a baby. And no offense to the men, but 19, 20, 21-year-old men, young men, they're still babies. They don't always make the greatest decisions. And he wanted to remove himself from the situation. I mean, he's freaking. I would be freaking. I go there just to do a quick little slider crime, and I end up shooting someone that I was trying to get away from. I certainly did not want to kill him. I want that removed. The truth of the case, if you cannot say what you believe happened, you think it could be one of two things, but you're not sure. We've already talked about that is a doubt of the law, and you cannot return a verdict of guilty. The truth in a criminal case is not that you be able to go back there and say A, B, C happened, then D, E, and F happened. The truth of the case is, did the state prove their version and disprove any other defenses? I appreciate your time and your patience and your listening. Mr. Melvin will have the last word. I encourage you to give him the same courtesy, but keep in mind, no one over here is going to be able to get up and come back. So think about, what would they have said? What did I hear that gives me a little bit of pause about what is said? And when the verdict comes back, I encourage you to look at all the evidence, hold Josiah responsible. He needs to be held responsible. Trying to do a slider crime, and it goes wrong. But it is voluntary manslaughter. Thank you.
July 10th, 2022, Brother Coleman lost his life. And the defendants came to steal. Here's the key thing. They were prepared to kill. This is slowed down. I'm sorry, this is not the slow down one. Coming up in support. Coming out. He grabs the gun that he dropped. Gets Mr. Coleman's gun that was still in the car. Then he runs back. We're going to see that again in slow motion. Just a little bit. But the key thing is, two of the people that you just saw had guns. Mr. Hewley's gun was locked, loaded, and ready to shoot. He brought it to the Quick Trip because he was prepared to kill. Mr. Booker, he brought a gun to the Quick Trip. You saw him. He's the man that comes running out, pointing his gun at Mr. Coleman because he was prepared to kill. Evidence, on the other hand, is proof by direct evidence from which you can infer other facts. You step outside, the ground is completely drenched. As far as the eye can see, you didn't see it rain, but you can testify it rained while I was in the courthouse. We make decisions all the time based on circumstantial evidence, but here's the other thing. The judge is also going to tell you the law doesn't require any greater degree of certainty for circumstantial evidence. They are equal. So, what about the charges that you have to apply the law to the evidence in this case? Felony murder with the gang acts, aggravated assault with the gang acts, felony murder based on hijacking the motor vehicle with the gang acts, then the hijacking, and then the possession of firearm during the commission of a felony. Let's talk about these charges because I want you to know you did the right thing. The first one is felony murder based on the aggravated assault. The judge is going to charge you for felony murder. The state has to prove the defendant caused the death of another person by committing a felony. And when you put a gun to somebody's head and shoot, that's felony, and you cause the death.
Lights.
Mr. Booker has already run around. It's spilling out. Mr. Hewley comes out. He's got a gun in his hand. Because he falls, he comes down, he gets up, bam, Mr. Coleman's dead. Mr. Hewley dropped the gun. Mr. Hewley picks it up. He runs back to the car to get the other gun that was in the car. Mr. Coleman never had his gun. And we are here today not because of the ills of society, not because of 30 years of rap music. We're here today because of the decisions of the defendants. Their decisions are what put us here today. And they were prepared to kill. Was fighting for his life. That holding the arm, watch the video when you see it again in slow mo. He was holding the arm that had the gun. He was, Mr. Hewley was not seriously provoked. The defense theory, the stated fact, I think the implication was that The defendant thought he was about to be shot, but mistake of fact is not a defense to a crime. And the judge will tell you this, because it's the law. Mr. Ely, get into the Mercedes 350. You heard two witnesses say we scoured that time frame and there was only one Mercedes 350 in the entire scouring that we went through. It had a headlight assembly and a tag reader. We checked flock. It was the only Mercedes. So by the way, it was the flock that showed up at the Texaco the night before. You have Mr. Collins' statement when Detective Harrison says, "Is this you?" Yeah, that's me. That's the clothes I'm wearing. And it was at the Texaco, the same Texaco that hit on a flock camera with the same license plate. Ladies and gentlemen, you can't prove it is not a theory. It's a game. Went into that car with a firearm. Mr. Coleman started to fight for his life, held onto his arm. Ladies and gentlemen, we have hijacking a motor vehicle. And Miles Collins provided support by renting the car, driving to the QT, and then helping him to escape. So let's talk about parties to a crime, because the judge is going to charge you that every person can be convicted as a party to a crime. That person directly committed it, or we're going under B, intentionally helped in the commission of the crime, whether it be hijacking a motor vehicle or aggravated assault. Then you become a party to a crime. Shooter to commit felony murder, a person who either directly or indirectly is a party to a crime, commits a motor vehicle hijacking or ag assault, they can be convicted of a felony murder. And that's what we're asking you to do. Who says it didn't mean for it to go down like that? Takes a picture of the victim's firearm that he went back to the car to get and is trying to profit. And the way you know it's the victim's firearm, even though you don't have the serial number, you don't have to have the serial number. Sometimes there's unique characteristics that make things special. And the thing that made it special was that little defect right there in the corner, and you see it right there. 90 minutes later. Dr. Martin Luther King said, the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Prophet Amos said, let justice roll like a mighty river. But maybe you tend towards the other side. I know we have one juror who's very much into literature, so let's talk about John Donne. In 1612, John Donne wrote, no man is an island entire unto himself. Every person is a piece of the continent and a part of the main. If a clod be washed away, Europe is the less, just as much as if it was primary. And any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind. They did it together. And they were prepared to kill. On behalf of the Coleman family,
thank you, Mr. Melvin. David Jared Booker, if you would please stand. McCray. State of Georgia versus David Jared Booker, indictment number 22B4072-4. Count 1, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 2, violation of Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 3, violation of Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 4, aggravated assault. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 5, violation of Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 6, violation of Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 7, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 8, violation of Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 9, violation of Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 10, hijacking a motor vehicle. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 11, violation of Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 12, violation of Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 13, possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 14, violation of Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 15, violation of Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Mr. Collins, if you'll please stand. State of Georgia versus Miles Collins, indictment number 22B 4072-4. Count 1, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 2, violation of Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 3, violation of Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 4, aggravated assault. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 5, violation of Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 6, violation of Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 7, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 8, violation of Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 9, violation of Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 10, hijacking a motor vehicle. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 11, violation of Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 12, violation of Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 13, possession of firearm during the commission of a felony. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 14, violation of Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 15, violation of Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Mr. Hewley, would you please stand? State of Georgia versus Josiah Hewley Jr., indictment number 22B 4072-4. Count 1, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 2, violation of Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 3, violation of Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 4, aggravated assault. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 5, violation of Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 6, violation of Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 7, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 8, violation of Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 9, violation of Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 10, hijacking a motor vehicle. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 11, violation of Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 12, violation of Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 13, possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 14, violation of Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 15, violation of Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty.
Following the prior felony convictions of Mr. Booker, Mr. Collins, as well as the first offender of Mr. Hewley, the state would call 4 witnesses in victim impact at this time with the court's permission.
Certainly.
First witness we would call is Jeffrey Michael Coleman, the brother. Mr. Coleman, if you'll come forward, I'll need to place you under oath, and then you can speak to the court about what you'd like to say. Sir, do you swear or affirm that the statement that you're about to give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes, sir. Thank you. Whatever you'd like to say, sir.
I just want to let y'all know, man, Bradley Coleman, he was somebody, and he still is somebody.
And sir, I'm going to ask you direct it to me
All right.
in the courtroom. Thank
Yeah,
you.
y'all took my brother, my only brother. And it's only the legacy that my brother left that's stopping me from putting hands and feet on all 3 of y'all. I swear to God. I hate y'all.
Mr. Coleman.
I need you to address what you'd like to see in sentencing, and for everyone, please do not address them.
Lock him up and throw away the key. That's it.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman.
Don, and I believe it's expose. Yes,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
expose. Expose?
Expose, yeah. Okay. Okay.
President of Mr. Sir, if you'll raise your right hand, do you solemnly swear from the testimony that you're about to give in this matter to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Sir, whatever comments you have, please address them to the court.
Okay. First off, Judge, thank you guys, thank the lawyers, everybody that participated to get what my family needs closure. What we're asking for is the highest, because we can't get him back. You know, I have to visit him somewhere that, you know, it's different. So my family need the closure. We appreciate the closure so we can move forward with the next chapter. This is one chapter now. His legacy and making sure his name live on is the next chapter. And at the end of the day, it's we prayed on this. We gotten it. We just want everything to go forward where we can, because we can't visit Bradley where he is. We can pray on it. We all miss him. You know, as y'all see, we here every day.
Right.
And but Judge, as what we're asking for to finish this chapter is to make sure they get exactly what they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Expose.
Vanessa Harris. Ms. Harris, if you'll raise your right hand, you solemnly swear from the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you.
Judge, it has been 2 years, 6 months, 18 days, 4.5 hours since they took our beloved Bradley. I still remember the day that it happened, like it happened today, and parts of it still haunt me at this moment. I said, their heinous crimes have completely impacted and changed our lives forever. I cannot even begin to describe the feeling of disgust I have for each of them, because they were not man enough to get a job and go out there and buy the car that they want. They hunted my nephew down like a wounded animal and shot him dead for a car. For a car. I have no pity for either one of them. May they live the rest of their miserable lives behind bars, never to walk the grounds again. I have no pity. I feel so bad for them. I feel bad for them because, you know, I feel bad for their parents. They got their parents. Their parents should never have to experience what we have experienced. My sister lost her son. My brother-in-law lost his son. My nephew lost his brother. My beautiful niece lost her father. And they get to just sit here? No, they need to go to prison for the rest of their life. I have no pity. No pity. Now send them away to their forever home, prison. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harris.
And finally, Judge, if you'll allow them to come up together, the father and mother of Mr. Cole.
Certainly.
Jeffrey, for you. Will you raise your hand? I solemnly swear affirm the testimony which I give in this matter to be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yana, on behalf of the Coleman family, we would like to thank you for this opportunity to speak before your courts and to speak about our wonderful son, Bradley Coleman. To the jury, thank you so much. Besides learning of the murder of our son and having to address the courts and to stand before these guys that murdered our son, this has absolutely been the hardest thing that we've ever had to do in life. Your Honor, may I reintroduce to you who our dear son, Bradley Coleman, who he was. And how this senseless act of gun violence has affected my husband and I, his young daughter, our family, friends, and the community, and the world as a whole. Bradley was a wonderful man of God. He was a man of integrity. He was a man with a vision. He was born and raised right here in Gwinnett County. Bradley graduated from Norcross High School, where he played football and basketball. He earned a 4-year full scholarship to Southern University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He graduated from Southern with 2 degrees, one in education and the other one in interdisciplinary studies. As proud parents, Your Honor, Bradley was absolutely everything to us. He was a son that you would want. He was an awesome father, son, activist, coach, community leader, counselor, entrepreneur, humanitarian, a motivator, and an educator. Brad even taught children that transitioned out of the jail system back into society. He was impactful on and off the football field. He was just an ordinary guy that did extraordinary things, and he was loved and respected by so many. Bradley cherished his mother, his father, his daughter, his friends, his family, his students, and his student athletes. Bradley was such an amazing man. He often watched his father and observed how he would protect, he would love, he would provide, and care for our family. Brad vowed to be the same type of man and father that his daddy was to him. However, because of these 3 individuals' cold-blooded nature and their careless act of violence with no regards to human life, our granddaughter Amira now has to grow up without her father. She cries constantly to me, Your Honor, telling me how much she loved and misses her daddy. She said, Grandma, I was only 5 years old when they took my daddy from me. It's not fair that he's not here with me. She also misses spending time with her daddy. He picked her up from school every single day. He was present in her life. She cherished Daddy and Daughter Day. Every Friday he would pick her up, take her out for ice cream, take her to Target, she loved Target, and do a little shopping and give her special gifts. But now, due to their act of murder, she and Bradley will no longer be able to create memories with each other or share those special days anymore with each other, like Daddy and Daughter Dance, her high school and college graduations. Her dad won't be able to walk her down the aisle when she gets married. He won't be able to experience being a grandfather. We will forever miss him, and we love him for all the things that he did in this life and for the things that he would never, ever get a chance to do because his life was snatched away from these 3 individuals. Bradley invested so much, Your Honor, into the community. He often encouraged his students to never give up on their dreams. He was such a loving teacher. He would drive the streets of New Orleans and go by known drug locations looking for his students who had been absent from school for days at a time. And he would encourage them to come back to school. That's just who he was. He did everything in his power to motivate them to do well and to continue their education. If his students did well, it was known for him to take them out, buy them the latest gym shoes that was out on the market. He did that too. And I remember him sharing with me one of his female students had gotten pregnant with little to no help from the father or her family. Brad made sure this child ate every single day. He bought her clothes and shoes, and he rallied around her and was that support system to her.
He even got the co-workers, the other teachers in the school, and they threw her a baby shower to make sure when that unborn child was born, she had everything she needed for her baby. That's who my baby was. He was truly a gift to the world who inspired so many. And one of the most amazing things about him, Your Honor, I know they talked about how tall he was. He was 6 feet, 9 inches tall. But guess what? He was a gentle giant with a heart of gold. He gave so much, Your Honor, to so many people. And he never required anything back. Never. And I remember when he passed away, he said, before he passed away, he said to me, Your Honor, he said, Mama, you don't know who I am. You won't know till I'm gone. He said, you'll understand who I am. And my husband and I, we didn't understand. We knew Bradley was a good person. We knew he was a loving person, but we didn't understand until he was gone. So many people came to us and told us how much good he sowed into them. It blew my mind. And now I understand that my husband and I not only gave birth to a child, we gave birth to a legacy, because that's who he is. Bradley was known for feeding and clothing the homeless. Several times he literally took the shirt off his back and would bless a homeless person with. His heart was always, Your Honor, to serve and to give back to the community and to bless people that was less fortunate. He led and marched in the Black Lives Matter protest in Atlanta, Georgia. His vision led him to coordinate the Togetherness Project, which he led in the city of Norcross. The purpose of his project was to bridge the gap in the communities and shine light on systematic inequality and worldwide problems that we face in the world today. Bradley's entrepreneurial spirit led him to create his own clothing line, Posture Collection. He most definitely left his imprint on this world. Even though Bradley accomplished so much in such a short period of time on this earth, he still, Your Honor, has so much good to give. And for that, my husband and I are just so proud of him. We're so honored to be his parents. You know, all you want as a parent is for your children to do well. And Bradley, like I said, he was everything to her. He was a good soul. And he didn't deserve this. Your Honor? Oh, God.
It's okay. It's okay.
Jesus. Your Honor, we love him. And we miss him so much. Your Honor, a parent should never, ever have to bury their child. They're supposed to bury us. Especially over the theft of a car and gang status activity, for which this cold-hearted, cowardly act of violence has left my family devastated. Our son, Bradley Lamar Coleman, was shot in the head at point-blank range with the 9mm handgun, execution style, by these three individuals. The bullet entered his skull, traveled through his brains, and exited through his neck. He was shot and killed, left dying, choking on his blood, bleeding out on a hot pavement at a local Quick Trip. Your Honor, he didn't deserve that. His death certificate says that he died within seconds. Your Honor, they didn't show him no mercy. And because they wanted to take his car into gang status and gang activity, this is simply unconscionable. Our son, again, did not deserve it. My husband and I did not deserve it. His daughter did not deserve it. His friends and family did not deserve it. His student athletes, they did not deserve this. Our hearts have been deeply wounded. We do not want another parent, child, sister, relative, friend to suffer at the hands of these three individuals: Josiah Hughley, David Booker, Miles Collins ever again. It's important that they don't ever have the freedom to commit another heinous crime like this again, and to bring so much pain and sorrow to another family ever in life. I have no doubt, Your Honor, in my spirit, if given the opportunity, they will do it again. Next time it may be your child, your grandchild, your husband, even you, Your Honor. Our prayer is that God would allow each of them to live a long, miserable life, and that they will rot in their prison cells for the rest of their miserable life for the murder of our son. They took a father away from a daughter, a 5-year-old daughter. They took a son, Your Honor, from their parents. They took a teacher and a coach from his students and student athletes. And they took a natural-born leader from this world. And now today, Your Honor, is the day of reckoning. That which they have sown, now shall they reap. Your Honor, due to this tragic and horrific manner in which our son Bradley Coleman was murdered, we respectfully ask that you show them no mercy as they showed my baby none. We also respectfully ask that each individual receive the maximum sentences for each guilty charge without parole. It is our sincere hope and deepest prayer, Your Honor, that you please take our request into consideration when making your decision on the sentencing. Your Honor, thank you and God bless you.
Let me just express to the Coleman family. Mr. and Mrs. Coleman, you're right. You should never have to bury a child. You should never have to bury a child. And it is my hope, because nothing we've done here over the last 3 weeks in this room can bring Bradley back. But it is my hope that you will begin healing after this is done, and that you will find some modicum of peace and be able to put him to rest and emulate him and honor him.
Your Honor, this being my first trial in front of this court, do you wish to hear from the state at the ending of the defendant's presentations or not?
It doesn't matter. You can go ahead, Mr. Melvin.
Thank you. Your Honor, in conclusion, the victim's family is asking for the maximum sentence, which is entirely appropriate for each of the defendants.
Judge, I'm going to respectfully ask, very simply, for a sentence of life with the possibility of parole.
Collins be sentenced to, on count 1, life with the possibility of parole.
Thank you, Your Honor. First off, to Mr. Coleman's parents and all of his friends that are here, my sincerest condolences. Your Honor, life without parole in this case, I understand the state asking for that, and I would also reiterate what Mr. Clegg has said. It seems like, yes, if you have a trial, the ante's always up, whereas it might not have been without a trial.
All right. Mr. Booker? On count 1, felony murder, I am sentencing you to life without the possibility of parole. Mr. David Booker, you've now been convicted of 15 felonies. You've been sentenced on 9 felonies because the other either vacate, there are 6 of them that either vacate by law or merge. Mr. Collins, Count 1, excuse me. Count 1, which is felony murder. Predicate act is aggravated assault. I sentence you to life without the possibility of parole. You have now been convicted of 15 felonies, but sentenced to 9 because 6 of them, by operation of law, either merge into the others or are vacated.
Hope y'all happy.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Family, the family of Mr. Coleman, the family of Mr. Coleman, the family of Mr. Coleman, look at me, the family of Mr. Coleman. Honor Bradley Coleman here. Honor Bradley Coleman. He is never coming back. Nothing that happens in this courtroom is going to bring Bradley Coleman back. Okay. Josiah Hewley.
Mark, can you see?
I can't see him. Mr. Hewley, count 1, felony murder. I sentence you to life without the possibility of parole. Mr. Hewley, you have now been convicted of 15 felonies, 6 of which either merge or vacate as an operation of law, so you'll be sentenced on 9 felonies. Thank you, Ms. Drake. Is there anything I need to take up from the state? Anything that, okay, thank you.
Pleasure to try a case in your court.
Love to see you, Mr. Clegg. Court is adjourned. Thank you.